welcome to the BC Professor Spotlight. This series is designed to learn about BC professors' projects and research in minutes. Today we'll talk with Heather Perez, Associate Dean of Online Liberal Arts, and who happens to be a philosopher. Hi, Heather.
Hello. Hi. Like you said, I have a PhD in philosophy from Florida State University here at Broward College. In addition to being an associate dean, I teach introduction to philosophy, introductory logic, ethics, and occasionally introduction to humanities.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us. So, can you tell us about a research project?
Sure. So my area of specialization is ethics and moral psychology. My dissertation focused on the normative more generally, so ought claims. And whether there's something essentially different about a moral claim, like we ought not lie, than other kinds of normative claims. For example, we ought to believe what's true, and that's what we call an epistemic norm. Well, this is one of the most interesting things I've worked on from my perspective. I'd say that the research others have found most interesting is the work that I did on what's called the foreign language effect. Researchers have shown that individuals tend to perform better at certain kinds of reasoning tasks when they read the prompts or hear the information in their non native language. So, if I'm a bilingual person and English is my first language and I also speak Spanish, then when I say non native language, it would be when I'm listening to prompts or hearing things in Spanish rather than my native language of English. My research extended this effect to moral judgment. So, interestingly, individuals are more likely to make utilitarian judgments or judgments that focus on the good or bad consequences of an action when thinking in their non native language. So, to set this up, I'd like to consider a version of the trolley problem. Do you remember the trolley problem, Haley?
Yes, I'm also a philosopher, so I remember. So the trolley problem is where you have a trolley or a train that's barreling down on some tracks, and it's going to hit five people. But you happen to be near a lever where you can switch the tracks, divert it down a different track. It will kill one, but save the five.
Exactly. And most individuals, when you do research in moral psychology, choose to switch. So if you put out a survey and you ask what one ought to do in this circumstance, they say you got to pull the lever and maximize the good consequences. So yes, it's terrible. One person dies, but at least it's less than five. So they choose to switch. However, we have a very similar thought experiment. It's called the footbridge problem. Do you want to explain that as well?
Sure, it's the same setup. Train is barreling down. Five people are gonna die, but this time you're on a bridge above the track, and there's one person there with like a large backpack or something like that, and you can push that person. It would kill them, but those five people would be saved.
Right. So this, from the perspective of first, seems to be the same problem because you have the same amount of lives that are lost or saved. So if you do nothing, five people will die. If you flip the switch or push the person, one individual dies, but five people are saved. So um, we're minimizing negative consequences, maximizing the positive consequences by acting in this case. However, what's interesting is that um, when we do these moral psychology experiments, we find that people do not have consistent judgments with respect to the trolley problem and the footbridge problem. So, or most individuals will say yes, pull the switch, but they'll say no, do not push the person. What's interesting with the foreign language effect, which what we call the moral foreign language effect, is that individuals who are reasoning in their non-native language make consistent judgments. So in both cases, they make the choice to maximize the good consequences, minimize the bad consequences. So the same percentage of people agree to save the individual on the tracks, whether you're pushing or whether you're pulling the lever. And this has been replicated across a lot of different languages as native and non-native. So English, Spanish, Chinese, French,
Hmm.
French to English, a bunch of different versions of languages. So it's not specific to one kind of language in either condition. And I would love to get back to this research as the last time I was reading about it, people are still hypothesizing about whether the mechanism for this has to do with reduced emotionality in a non native language or something else.
Interesting. So does that mean they reason more morally, like they're more moral in their secondary language, or less moral, or just that they reason in a different way, morally speaking?
As a philosopher, I don't think it's an issue of more moral or less moral, although I think if you were to look this up, the news articles were saying things like, oh, people are less or more moral in their in a foreign language, like, oh, we're going to suddenly no longer know how to reason morally in a different language. But what I think is that there are a lot of kinds of moral reasoning um, that we can be thinking about or be influenced by. And for some reason, when we're thinking in our non-native language, we're more receptive to the consequences, or less receptive to the uncomfortable feeling of pushing someone off of a footbridge, right?
Interesting. So, do you think it is that you're more or less emotional or more rational in your second language, or what do you think? What's your hypothesis?
To be honest, I'm not sure anymore, but my original hypothesis was that it's reduced emotionality, and that's what a lot of people find to be intuitively plausible. However, I did a pilot study involving disgust, and we found no significant difference in emotional ratings between individuals in their native or non-native language. And what we did is these poor individuals, we had cases that were more and more disgusting related to etiquette norm violations. So we were trying to avoid moral norms, but we talked about etiquette norms like eating, soup at a table, and we just made that circumstance more and more disgusting. And there was no significant difference in each of those cases. So it's not as if someone in their non-native language was less disgusted than they were in their in their native language.
Interesting. Very interesting. All right, so let's do a fun question as we're wrapping up, which is what's your favorite TV show or movie right now?
Well, this is a hard question. I don't really like picking favorites, but I will say my favorite TV show that is currently on the air is Severance. Whether it will stay my favorite TV show will really depend on how they stick the landing. But if you don't know the premise, if you haven't seen the show, in Severance, individuals go through a brain surgery that divides their conscious experiences. The severed individual gets to avoid the experiencing the monotony of the workday. So they go to work and their conscious experiences end there. So they go down the elevator, and then the next thing they know, they're coming back up the elevator and going home. So for them, time sort of stops and then starts again when they're back home. The TV show is great for a lot of reasons. It has good writing, there's a lot of mysteries, but for me, what I really enjoy is these philosophical questions that we get to consider and explore just based on the premise alone. So when the individual goes down that elevator, an entirely new person, which they call the innie, is created for the purposes of going to work. And that innie, it's not a new innie every day. That innie is the same person that is experiencing every workday, makes friends with their colleagues, knows what's going on at work, all of that. But they do not have the memories of the original person who they called the outie. They don't have the right to quit work. It's up to their outie. And if the outie quits the job, the innie ceases to exist. So
Hmm,
we get a lot of interesting questions posed by the scenario about personhood and morality. So for as far as personhood is concerned, is the innie the same person as the outie? They are the same physical body, but they have none of the same memories or experiences. Considering this like really helps you think about your intuitions about what a person is. Is it a continuous set of conscious experiences, or is it something physical? And that's something that philosophers, as you know, have been talking about for a really long time. Is it that continuous set of memories or something different? Is it a soul? Is it a physical body? So you get to really think about that. Does any have a separate soul than the outie? What's going on there? Additionally, if the innie is what we consider a person, we have to think about the morality of what they're doing. How can you justify severance itself? The process creates a separate person who has no rights, doesn't experience the outside world, and works as essentially a slave for the outie or for the company. So it brings up a
interesting.
lot of good questions. And I think when
Yeah,
production companies do this, we get to have a lot of fun conversations with our students.
very interesting. You make me want to watch the show. Are there any other good shows or movies with philosophical themes that you recommend?
There's a lot. I don't have any that come to mind right now, but if you haven't seen The Good Place, you should definitely check it out because it's a comedy, which is a little different than Severance, which is more of a drama, and you get to see a whole lot of interesting moral dilemmas.
That's one of my favorites. Nice. Well, thank you, Heather, for coming and talking with us today.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for watching the BC Online Professor Spotlight, and I hope you'll join us for another episode soon.